On the 17th of November 2023, at 5:14 in the morning, a call came in from a 7-year-old Lisa to the emergency number 112. With a trembling voice, she reported that an unknown person had broken into her house. The dispatcher asked Lisa to hide and wait for the police to arrive. The first patrol arrived at the crime scene after 8 minutes. In the 3-story villa in the exclusive settlement Pine Forest, the lifeless bodies of 3 people with numerous stab and cut wounds were discovered. Anna Sokolova, 34 years old, lay in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. Sergei Sokolov, 38 years old, was found in the hallway next to the stairs. The 11-month-old Kirill Sokolov was in his crib. The only survivor was 7-year-old Lisa Sokolova. She was found wrapped in a blanket in a corner of the living room. During the examination, the paramedics found no physical injuries on her. During questioning, she told them that she had woken up from a noise, seen a man with a mask, and had hidden. The tragedy in the Sokolovs' house shook even experienced police officers. No one suspected at the time that the investigative team was searching for a perpetrator who did not exist, and that the perpetrator had been right in front of them the entire time. The Sokolov family moved to Pine Forest in 2016. Sergei held the position of financial director in a large bank with an annual income of more than 15 million rubles. Anna previously worked as a model, and after the birth of her daughter, she took care of the house and engaged in charitable organizations. According to neighbors, they were a model family. They always smiled and greeted. Sergei walked the dog every morning. Anna organized fundraising campaigns. We all envied them, recalls Irina Kravtsova, who lived in the neighboring house. Lisa Sokolova attended the 2nd grade of a prestigious gymnasium. The teachers noted her extraordinary abilities in mathematics and music. At 6 years old, she already spoke English fluently and was preparing for international Olympiads. She had the highest IQ of her grade level. We predicted a great future for her, says the director of the gymnasium, Svetlana Morozova. If someone had told me that she was capable of such a thing, I would never have believed it. The first disturbing signs began after Kirill's birth in December 2022. It was then that strange incidents began in the Sokolovs' house. In January 2023, the infant was hospitalized with symptoms resembling poisoning. The doctors could not determine the exact cause. In February, Anna discovered an open window in the nursery, although she was sure she had closed it. In March, the nanny found puncture marks on the child's body. The examination revealed that they were pricks from a sewing needle. Maria Petrova, 65 years old, worked as a nanny for the Sokolov family for 2 years. She was the first to raise the alarm. I noticed how the girl looked at her brother. I will not forget that look until the end of my life. Complete absence of emotions, as if she were looking not at a person but at an object. I tried to talk to Anna, but she would not listen to me. In April 2023, Maria was hospitalized with severe poisoning. The toxicological examination revealed traces of rat poison in her blood. After discharge, the woman refused to return to the Sokolovs' house and submitted her resignation. I was convinced that Lisa had done it, but who would have believed that a 7-year-old child was capable of such a thing? In the next 6 months, 5 nannies changed in the Sokolovs' house. None worked there longer than a month. The last one quit a week before the tragedy and complained about the oppressive atmosphere and the strange behavior of the girl. The neighbors began to notice changes in the family. Anna looked exhausted and often cried. Sergei began to stay longer at work. Loud arguments were increasingly heard in the house. Once I saw Anna running out of the house in the middle of the night only in her nightgown. She was screaming into the phone that she could not take it anymore, that something terrible was happening in the house, neighbor Kravtsova recounts. One day before the incident, Lisa's teacher summoned the parents to school. Drawings of knives and bloody figures were found in her notebook. The school psychologist recommended seeing a specialist, but it was already too late. On the 17th of November 2023, at 23:40, the Sokolov couple returned from a charity event. The housekeeper had left the house at 22:15 after putting the children to bed. According to the surveillance camera recordings, no one entered or left the house until the police arrived. According to the investigation materials, the events of the night of the 17th of November 2023 were reconstructed step by step. Anna and Sergei Sokolov returned home at 23:40 from a charity event of the Children of the Future Foundation. The surveillance cameras recorded that they went to the bedroom at 23:52. At this time, the children were already asleep. At 0:13, the hallway camera recording shows Lisa coming out of her room and going to the kitchen. She spends 7 minutes there before returning to the bedroom with something in her hand. Experts later determined that it was a kitchen knife with a 15-centimeter long blade. At 0:34, the camera at the stairs records Lisa going to the 3rd floor where Kirill's nursery was located. There was no camera in the room itself, so the investigators had to rely on indirect evidence and results of the forensic examination. Kirill Sokolov was found in his crib with numerous stab and cut wounds in the neck and chest area. In total, the experts counted 8 stab wounds. According to the pathologist's report, death occurred from blood loss around 0:40. At 0:53, the camera captures Lisa again as she goes down the stairs. This time, dark stains are visible on her nightgown. The criminalists confirmed that it was the infant's blood. The further events took place in the parents' bedroom on the 2nd floor. Judging by the arrangement of the bodies and the nature of the injuries, Anna Sokolova became the next victim. She received 12 knife wounds, mainly in the area of the neck and upper torso. Defensive injuries were found on her hands, indicating that the woman tried to protect herself. Anna probably woke up during the attack, states the coroner's report. The nature of the injuries suggests that the first stabs were inflicted when she was lying on her back. Then she tried to sit up and fend off the attacker. The investigation revealed that skin particles from Lisa, as well as threads from her nightgown, were found under Anna's fingernails. This indicated that a brief struggle had taken place between mother and daughter. Anna's screams probably woke Sergei up. Judging by the traces on the carpet and the blood spatters on the walls, the man jumped out of bed and rushed to the bedroom door. He received a knife stab in the back and further stabs when he went down in the hallway. In total, 17 injuries were found on Sergei's body. Death occurred from a stab that injured the carotid artery. After the incident, Lisa returned to the kitchen, where she thoroughly washed the knife. Then she changed her nightgown and hid it in the garbage bin in the garage. Exactly there, the criminalists found this crucial piece of evidence. At 1:42, the cameras recorded how Lisa returned to her room. There she remained until 5:14 in the morning before she dialed the emergency number. Investigator Alexei Karpov, who was the first to arrive at the crime scene, remembers, "When I entered the house, I saw the girl in the living room. She sat, motionless, wrapped in a blanket. The first thing that made me suspicious was the absence of tears. Children in such situations are normally hysterical." During questioning, Lisa told that she had woken up from a noise, had seen a large man in black clothing and mask, and had then hidden in the closet. She claimed not to have seen what had happened to her parents and her brother. Her story was too coherent for a child in shock, notes Karpov. She repeated the same sentences without changes, as if she had learned them by heart. This is atypical for witnesses, especially for children. Initially, the police nevertheless searched for an unknown perpetrator. The crime experts carefully checked all windows and doors of the house for break-in traces. The surveillance camera recordings were examined not only in the house but also in the entire perimeter of the property. No evidence of intrusion by a foreign person was found. The turning point in the investigation came 3 days after the incident. The criminalists found microscopic blood traces of all 3 victims on the kitchen knife that had been thoroughly cleaned and put back in the drawer. Lisa's fingerprints were discovered on the handle of the knife. The former nanny, Maria Petrova, immediately contacted the police when she learned of the tragedy. I told them immediately, check the girl, she is capable of it. The psychologist, Elena Volkova, who had worked with Lisa at school, handed over to the investigators a notebook with drawings in which Lisa had depicted scenes of violence. In recent months, her drawings became increasingly disturbing. On them, an infant was often seen, surrounded by red lines that reminded of blood. On the 6th of December 2023, after 2 weeks of investigation, the investigators concluded that Lisa Sokolova, Dr. Vera Kamenskaya, head of the Department for Child Psychiatry, conducted a comprehensive examination of Lisa. We diagnosed a rare form of childhood psychopathy. The girl completely lacks empathy. She feels no remorse for her actions. At the same time, her intelligence is significantly above average, which enabled her to hide her true condition for a long time. During therapy sessions, Lisa finally told about the motives of her act. According to her words, she had planned the action since her brother's birth. They loved him more. I wanted them to disappear. This sentence is recorded in the protocol of the session from the 15th of January 2024. After Lisa's placement in a specialized medical facility, the investigators continued the examination of the family history. The investigators discovered that behind the external prosperity, serious problems were hidden that no one had noticed. The analysis of Anna Sokolova's personal correspondence showed that she had noticed disturbing changes in her daughter's behavior already a year before the tragedy. In messages to her friend, Marina Klimova, she wrote, "Sometimes I fear my own child. That's not normal, I know, but when she looks at me, it seems to me as if there is an emptiness in her." Sergei Sokolov became withdrawn and irritable in recent months, according to statements from his colleagues. He declined company events and often took work home. According to his deputy Igor Pavlov, Sergei once admitted that something strange is going on at home, but refused to explain what exactly. The examination of Lisa's school records brought several incidents to light that had not been made public before. In September 2022, the teacher found a dead bird in Lisa's desk, wrapped in a paper napkin. In October, 2 classmates complained that Lisa had threatened them with scissors. In December, the school nurse documented a case where Lisa had hit another student's head against the table edge, but the affected student's parents did not file a report. The parents took Lisa out of school for 2 weeks after these incidents. Sergei explained to the administration that they had consulted a private psychologist. Documents about consultations were not found in the file. After Kirill's birth, the situation deteriorated drastically. In the infant's medical records, 6 visits to the emergency ambulance during the first 6 months of his life were recorded. The doctors diagnosed bruises, cuts, and first-degree burns. The parents explained the injuries through domestic accidents. In February 2023, the pediatrician sent an inquiry to the Youth Welfare Office, requesting to check the child's conditions, but the examination found no violations. The surveillance camera recordings in the house, restored by technical specialists, contained dozens of episodes in which Lisa inflicted pain on her brother when the parents were not looking. She stabbed him with needles, covered his face with a pillow, and added unknown substances to the baby food. In Anna's personal diary, which was found in the bedroom safe, there were records of her growing moments of suspicion. "Today I caught Elle standing over Kay's crib with scissors. She said she wanted to cut off a piece of his hair as a keepsake. I don't believe her. God, am I going crazy? This is my child after all. S says I need to rest." The last entry in the diary is dated the 15th of November, 2 days before the incident. "I found her collection in a shoebox under the bed. Inside were pieces of Kay's hair, his pacifier that was soaked with something red, a dried mouse and threads tied into knots like fingers. I showed it to S. He finally understood. We decided to take L to a specialist on Monday. I hope we're not too late." During the search of Lisa's room, experts discovered a hiding place in the ventilation shaft. There were diaries with detailed plans and drawings about the action, dated 3 months before the event. The records contain sketches of the house with marked camera locations, schemes of the parents' and nanny's movements, and lists of necessary tools. The psychiatric examination conducted in February 2024 revealed in Lisa signs of a rare form of childhood psychopathy, including behavioral disorders, sadistic tendencies, and a complete lack of empathy. Dr. Kamenskaya noted in her conclusion, "The patient shows a high degree of manipulative behavior. She consciously creates the image of a normal child, although she is fully aware of her actions and their consequences." During therapy sessions, Lisa gradually began to speak openly about her actions. The recordings of these sessions included in the case files contain shocking confessions. "I liked watching Mama cry when something happened to Kirill. She thought I was worried too, but I just wanted to see how long she would cry." When asked whether she felt regret about the death of her parents and her brother, Lisa answered, "No, they bothered me, especially when they pretended everything was fine. Nothing was fine, they were just pretending." The methodology with which Lisa had planned the deed attracted special attention from experts. According to child psychiatrist Alexei Morozov, who was brought into the case, most children with antisocial tendencies act impulsively. Lisa's case is unique because she showed the ability for long-term planning, secrecy, and manipulation at the level of an adult criminal. The official medical opinion states that Lisa Sokolova poses a high danger to society and needs long-term treatment in a closed facility with constant observation. The expert commission recognized Lisa as legally incompetent, taking into account her age and mental state. The Sokolov family's property was auctioned, and the proceeds were deposited into a special account that Lisa will only have access to upon reaching the age of majority and under the condition of successful treatment. The house where the tragedy occurred was demolished by decision of local authorities after several months of vacancy. The Lisa Sokolova case caused great resonance in the professional community. The Ministry of Health initiated a program to train pediatricians for early detection of signs of psychopathy in children. Schools introduced mandatory psychological examinations for elementary school students. The Child Protection Service revised protocols for responding to reports of strange behavior in children. According to the latest data, Lisa Sokolova continues to be in a specialized medical facility. Doctors note that her condition has shown no significant improvements over the past year. She remains distant, rarely shows emotions, and continues to manipulate staff and other patients. The prognosis for recovery is assessed by specialists as extremely cautious. On the 14th of September 2020, at 22:47, Maxime Levine, a 28-year-old IT cybersecurity specialist, was setting up the wireless network in his new apartment in the Woodlands residential complex in a suburb of Chicago. What should have been an ordinary technical procedure turned into the beginning of one of the most shocking investigations in the history of Cook County. "I was checking unprotected access points in the complex's network. That's a standard procedure for assessing vulnerabilities," Levine recalls. "When I started the scan, the program discovered several unprotected IP addresses. Among them were also surveillance cameras." Levine, who worked as a remote cybersecurity consultant for corporate clients, had moved to Woodlands only a month earlier, attracted by the quiet environment and the possibility of working from home. He hardly communicated with his neighbors and preferred to focus on his projects. Woodlands positioned itself as a prestigious residence for the upper middle class. 2-room apartments started here at $3,200 per month. The complex attracted successful professionals, couples, and those who valued security and privacy. Levine connected out of curiosity to the unprotected network and expected to see cameras of the entrance area or parking lot. Instead, his computer displayed 4 video streams from someone's apartment. "The first thing I saw was an empty room with white walls, minimalist furnishing, a bed, a table, a chair. No personal items, no toys, no books, no posters. And then a child appeared in the picture. On the screen was a boy of about 9 to 10 years old, thin, with short-cut hair. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared straight ahead, barely moving. In another transmission window, the same room was visible from a different angle. He sat too motionless that immediately seemed strange, says Levine. Normal children don't sit like that. He looked like programmed. After several minutes of observation, Levine saw a woman enter the room. She was well-dressed, with hair tied in a neat knot. The woman went to the boy, gave him a glass of water and 2 pills, made sure he swallowed them, then methodically checked the latches on the window and went out, closing the door. The sound of the lock was clearly audible. At that moment, I realized something was wrong. That was my neighbor from the staircase, Elizabeth Clark. I had seen her several times. She always smiled and greeted. And at a parent meeting at the local school, she was introduced as Teacher of the Year. None of the earlier encounters with Elizabeth gave Levin cause for suspicion. The 41-year-old woman worked as an elementary school teacher at a prestigious private school and was often mentioned in the local newspaper in connection with educational initiatives and charity events. That same evening, Levin checked Elizabeth's social networks. Her Instagram profile was filled with photos of a happy family. She, her husband Robert, and their 12-year-old adopted daughter Mia. The last post, dated the same day, contained a photo of Elizabeth and Mia at a school concert with the caption, "So proud of my talented girl, #blessedmama." Nowhere were there mentions of the boy. Not a single photo, not a word about a second child, says Levin. And this despite the fact that they regularly publish details of their family life, family dinners, outings, Mia's school events. Faced with this ethical dilemma, Levin decided to continue observation before raising alarm. Over the next 48 hours, he documented the proceedings in the Clarks' apartment. The boy was kept in an isolated room with heavy curtains in front of the windows. Every morning at 7 o'clock, Elizabeth or Robert brought breakfast, always the same porridge and a glass of water. At 8:30, the child received pills. From 9 to 12 o'clock, the boy worked with textbooks at the table under camera observation. At 12:30, lunch and more pills. Then 3 more hours of instruction, dinner at 18 o'clock, the last pills at 20 o'clock, and bedtime at 21 o'clock. His life was absolutely regimented. No deviations, no spontaneity. The boy moved like a robot, carried out instructions. He never smiled, never cried, showed practically no emotions. Particularly disturbing for Levin was the discovery of the Clark family's double life. While Mia moved freely around the apartment, went for walks, went to school, and participated in family activities, the boy remained completely isolated. Most shocking was the moment when the whole family, Robert, Elizabeth, and Mia, gathered in the living room for family dinner on Friday evening, while the boy was brought food to his room and the empty plate was immediately taken away again. It seemed as if Mia didn't even know about the existence of this child. She behaved like a normal teenager, laughed, argued with her parents about bedtime, and only a few meters away from her, behind a wall, was the imprisoned boy. On the 17th of September, after collecting 3 days of video evidence, Levin approached the police. He contacted District Officer James Rodriguez, handed him screenshots, and reported his observations. "I encountered complete distrust," Levin recalls. "Officer Rodriguez looked at me as if I were crazy. He said something like, 'Do you understand who you're talking about? Elizabeth Clark is a respected educator. Her husband works in social services. They are known for their work with difficult children.'" Levin's report was registered, but no action followed. Officer Rodriguez promised to check the information, but warned Levin about the consequences of false accusations against respected citizens. Robert Clark, 43 years old, held a position as a social worker in Cook County and specialized in problematic families. His professional reputation was impeccable. In 15 years of career, he had received several awards for outstanding service to the community. According to his official biography on the Social Services website, Robert had dedicated his life to protecting vulnerable children and strengthening family values. In 2014, the Clark couple adopted Mia, then a 5-year-old girl, from the foster system. The story of the exemplary adoptive family was highlighted several times in local media. Elizabeth regularly conducted seminars for adoptive parents, sharing experiences and methods of positive parenting. Precisely this contrast between their public image and what I saw on the cameras convinced me that I had to act, says Levin. These people were not just keeping a child locked up, they had built an entire system of lies behind which something terrible was hidden. Receiving no support from the local police, Levin began his own investigation. He studied the camera recordings, documented every interaction with the boy, analyzed the daily routine of the Clark family. The decisive moment came on the 20th of September when Levin, during observation, saw Robert bring a folder with documents into the boy's room. He placed it on the table and said something to the child while pointing to the papers. When Robert left, the camera captured the documents in close-up. Among them was a medical chart with the name Jacob and the birth date 17th of February 2012. Levin immediately began searching for information about missing children named Jacob. Among dozens of cases, one caught his attention. Jacob Miller, 3 years old, was reported missing on the 4th of March 2015 in Gary, Indiana, about 80 kilometers from Chicago. When I saw the photo of missing Jacob Miller, my breath caught. Even taking into account the age difference, the similarity was obvious. The same eyes, the same facial shape. And most importantly, Robert Clark was working in Gary at the time when the boy disappeared. In the case of Jacob Miller's disappearance, it was stated that the boy disappeared from the house where he lived with his single mother, Amanda Miller, 24 years old, who had problems with drugs. The police report stated that social services had visited the family multiple times due to complaints about inadequate childcare. The main suspect was Jacob's biological father, who was serving a sentence for domestic violence. But the name of the social worker who visited the family was not mentioned in public reports. When he realized the possible scope of the crime, Levin understood that he needed professional help. He turned to Jessica Ramirez, an investigative journalist from the Chicago Tribune, who was known for her reports on corruption and crimes against children. When this guy Maxim came to me with a USB stick full of video recordings, I was initially skeptical, Ramirez tells. We constantly receive reports about conspiracy theories and secret crimes. But when I saw these recordings and compared them with the photos of missing Jacob Miller, I realized that we were dealing with something extraordinary. On the 23rd of September, 2021, Levin and Ramirez met with investigator Michael Carter from the Youth Affairs Department of the Chicago Police. Carter, a 51-year-old police veteran with 22 years of experience, carefully studied the material collected by Levin. I remember how I watched these videos and felt my hair standing up, says investigator Carter. It was not just a case of child abuse. It was a completely thought-out system of isolation and control implemented by people who should have protected children because of their profession. And the most frightening thing, they seemed to sincerely believe that they were doing something right. After the meeting with investigator Carter, the investigation moved to a new level. To obtain a lawful search warrant, additional evidence was needed, and Carter decided to authorize legal surveillance of the Clarks' apartment. We found ourselves in a complicated legal situation, explains investigator Carter. Levin's original evidence was obtained through illegal means and could not be used in court, but it gave us sufficient grounds for suspicion to initiate an official investigation. On the 25th of September 2021, the police installed covert surveillance of the Clarks' house. At the same time, investigator Carter began a thorough review of the couple's professional activity. Robert Clark had indeed worked in Gary, Indiana from 2012 to 2015. According to social services records, his duties included supervising problematic families, including cases with parents who suffered from drug addiction. He was transferred to Chicago in April 2015, only 1 month after Jacob Miller's disappearance. That was the first serious signal, says Carter. The temporal coincidence of the child's disappearance and Robert's job change seemed too convenient. When we checked who handled the Miller family case in Gary, it turned out that the last entries were made exactly by Robert Clark. Jessica Ramirez, the journalist who had joined the investigation, traveled to Gary to meet the missing boy's mother. Amanda Miller, now a 30-year-old woman, had undergone rehabilitation from drug addiction and had been working as a counselor at an addiction help center for 5 years. When I saw Amanda, I was surprised at how much she had changed compared to the photos in the police reports, Ramirez tells. Before me stood a composed, serious woman who searched the internet every day for information about her missing son. Amanda Miller confirmed that Robert Clark was her social worker and visited her house 2 to 3 times a month in the year before Jacob's disappearance. He was always strict, but I thought he was just doing his job. Amanda Miller's statement reads, "He constantly made notes about how I dealt with Jacob, criticized everything, from the food I gave him to the toys he had. He said my instability would harm my son's development." Particularly important was Amanda's memory of Robert's last visit. 2 weeks before Jacob's disappearance, he came with a woman he introduced as a child development specialist. They conducted some tests with Jacob and then talked with each other for a long time. I heard the woman say, "His potential is incredible, but here it will never be realized." Now I understand that it was most likely Elizabeth Clark. The police report about Jacob's disappearance from the 4th of March 2015 stated that the child had disappeared from his bed at night. The window in the children's room was open, although Amanda claimed to have closed it before bedtime. The first to arrive was a patrol officer who was called by a neighbor who had heard Amanda's screams in the morning. Robert Clark, as the supervising social worker, was informed about the incident and arrived at the scene 45 minutes after the police. In light of new data, this appears as an ideal position for manipulating the investigation, notes investigator Carter. Clark had access to the case files from the beginning and could steer the investigation in the direction he desired. The main suspicion fell on Jacob's biological father, Eric Peterson, who had a criminal record for domestic violence. However, Peterson had a solid alibi. On the night of the disappearance, he was 120 miles away from Gary, which was confirmed by camera recordings and witness statements. Parallel to the investigation of the past, investigator Carter's team continued observing the current situation. On the 28th of September, technicians installed directional microphones that could record sounds from the Clarks' apartment. The recordings confirmed the suspicion. There was indeed a child in the apartment who was neither seen by neighbors nor by visitors. "We heard a quiet child's voice mechanically repeating a text," testifies technical specialist David Chen. "It was not ordinary child speech, but a monotonous repetition, as if it were memorized. And the voice of an adult, a woman, who corrected him when he made mistakes." On the 29th of September, a thermal image confirmed the presence of a person of small size in a room that, according to the floor plan, should have been a storage closet. The analysis showed that the physical parameters of this person corresponded to a child of 9 to 10 years old. Maxime Levin continued documenting the activity of the surveillance cameras, concentrating on the details in the boy's life and the interactions with the Clark couple. "Most disturbing was how they treated him," says Levin. "There was no cruelty in the usual sense. They did not hit him, did not scream. Instead, there was absolute emotional coldness. They treated him like a test subject. The recordings showed that the boy spent up to 8 hours daily with textbooks and workbooks. Elizabeth regularly checked his work and marked mistakes with a red pen. Correct answers were rewarded with an additional portion of food or 30 minutes of free time, which the child usually spent sitting motionless at the window with lowered blinds." The investigation uncovered a strict regime of medicinal control. 3 times daily, the boy received tablets, judging by the packaging, strong psychotropic medications including Ritalin and Zoloft, which are used to treat hyperactivity and depression. These medications are not prescribed to children without serious medical indications, explains Dr. Nina Kowalski, a child psychiatrist who advised the investigations. Particularly disturbing was the absence of any medical supervision. According to the records, the dosage was changed at Elizabeth's discretion without consultation with specialists. On the 1st of October 2021, during Robert Clark's shift change, investigator Carter managed to obtain important information from the parking lot guard of the Woodlands complex. Manuel Garcia had worked at the complex since its opening and knew all the residents. Mr. Garcia told us that the Clarks moved into the complex in May 2015, only 2 months after Jacob Miller's disappearance, notes Carter. But what really caught our attention was his memory of a furniture truck. Garcia remembered that besides the usual furniture, the workers carried a large wooden crate into the Clarks' apartment, which Robert described as equipment for a home laboratory. Jessica Ramirez conducted interviews with former neighbors of the Clarks at their previous residence, a small town called Valparaiso, Indiana. The family lived there only 2 months, from March to May 2015, in a rented house in a remote area. They kept to themselves, testifies Martha Jenkins, who lived across the street. I saw the girl a few times. She played in the backyard. But when I asked if she wanted to play with my grandchildren, Elizabeth immediately took her into the house. After that, they put up additional privacy screening on the fence. On the 5th of October came the breakthrough in the investigations through the discovery of recordings from surveillance cameras of a nearby pharmacy. Elizabeth Clark regularly bought, every 2 weeks, the same medications that were given to the boy. The prescriptions were issued in the name of Thomas Johnson, a patient who, as it turned out, did not exist in the databases of insurance companies. That gave us the first direct evidence of illegal activities, says investigator Carter. The use of forged prescriptions is a federal crime that allowed us to obtain a search warrant. An important find was Elizabeth Clark's academic activity. Besides her work as a teacher, she published articles in little-known educational journals under the pseudonym E. Milton. These articles, discovered by Ramirez, set forth radical views on child-rearing. In the article Pure Education, Liberation from Social Contamination, 2016, the author claimed, traditional educational methods are doomed to failure due to constant external influences. Only complete control over the informational, social, and emotional environment of a child can create a truly healthy personality. Another publication, Pharmacological Support of the Educational Process, 2018, openly defended the use of psychotropic medications for optimizing learning and eliminating destructive emotional reactions. These publications revealed Elizabeth's true ideology, notes Ramirez. She created a theoretical foundation to justify her actions by presenting isolation and medicinal control as progressive educational methods. The comparison of Elizabeth's academic texts with the regime observed on the cameras showed amazing similarity. She literally implemented her theoretical concepts on the kidnapped child. The investigation uncovered a particularly disturbing aspect. The Clark family led a double life not only in the social but also in the physical sense. Their apartment had an unusual floor plan, with a secret room that was carefully hidden from casual visitors. After studying the architectural plans of the complex, we saw that in the Clark's apartment there should be a storage room of about 9 square meters, explains Alicia Green, a real estate specialist who was involved in the investigation. But actually, they had converted this space into a full room with soundproofing. The entrance was disguised as a bookshelf in Robert's study. On the 8th of October, after sufficient evidence was gathered, investigator Carter assembled a task force for searching the Clark's apartment. The operation was planned for the evening, when according to observations the entire family should be at home. We prepared for every scenario, recalled Carter, but what worried us most was the psychological state of the child. After 7 years of isolation and manipulation, the boy could be seriously traumatized by contact with the outside world. At the same time, Maxime Levine continued observation through the cameras and noticed a disturbing change in Robert Clark's behavior. On the evening of the 7th of October, when reviewing the recordings, he saw Robert enter the boys' room with a folder full of documents. For 20 minutes, he explained something to the child, pointed to the papers, and then took a small object from his pocket that resembled a USB stick. When I enlarged the image, I understood that it was an electronic car key, says Levine. Robert was showing the boys some kind of route on a map. I immediately contacted investigator Carter. Out of concern that the Clarks might have learned about the investigation and were planning to relocate the child, the police accelerated the operation. On the evening of the 8th of October 2021, at 1942, the task force entered the Clarks' apartment with a search warrant. On the 8th of October 2020 at 1942, the task force, led by investigator Michael Carter, entered the Clarks' apartment in the Woodlands residential complex. The operation was carried out with the greatest caution, taking into account the presence of children in the house. We knocked and announced ourselves as the law requires, recalls investigator Carter. Robert Clark opened the door and seemed completely calm. Even when I showed the search warrant, he said, "You are making a mistake, but we cooperate with the law." In the living room were Elizabeth and Mia Clark. The 12-year-old girl seemed frightened and confused. One of the officers led her aside, while the others began the search. Elizabeth maintained an icy calm, relates Officer Julia Rodriguez, who participated in the operation. She seemed to expect that we would leave empty-handed. She even offered us coffee. It was a surreal moment. The search focused on Robert's study, where according to the apartment floor plan, the entrance to the hidden room should be located. A large bookshelf, filled with specialized literature on psychology and pedagogy, occupied the entire wall. There were no visible mechanisms or handles. I accidentally pressed on the spine of Fundamentals of Behavioral Psychology, and part of the shelf slid to the side, says Officer Edward Murphy. It was a real secret passage, like in movies. Behind it opened a short corridor that led to a locked door. Robert Clark, when he saw that the secret room had been discovered, unexpectedly changed his behavior. "You don't understand what you're doing. We saved him. We created ideal conditions." These words are recorded in Officer Murphy's report. The door to the room was secured with 2 locks. After Robert refused to hand over the keys, the officers were forced to break them open. In the room of about 9 square meters, with thick curtains in front of the only window, they found a boy sitting on the edge of a neatly made bed. He didn't seem frightened or surprised, testifies investigator Carter. He just looked at us curiously, as if we were part of an experiment. When I introduced myself and said that we had come to help, he asked, "Are you new teachers?" The boy wore a clean white t-shirt and gray pants. Physically, he seemed well-groomed, but noticeably thin for his age. Perfect order reigned in the room. Textbooks neatly stacked on the table, notebooks aligned at the edges, the bed perfectly made. On the wall hung the only decoration, a table with the daily schedule and markings for completed tasks. According to the medical report prepared on site by paramedic Rachel Gordon, the boy showed no visible signs of physical violence or injuries, but displayed all signs of psychological trauma and institutionalization. His speech was mechanical, with limited vocabulary, consisting mainly of academic terms and formal phrases. When I asked him his name, he answered, "Subject J117, Carter recounts. Only after several attempts did he say, "Sometimes they call me Jacob." The boy was immediately placed in the custody of social services and transported to Chicago Children's Hospital for comprehensive examination. A DNA test conducted the next day confirmed that it was indeed Jacob Miller, who had disappeared on the 4th of March 2015. Robert and Elizabeth Clark were arrested on charges of child abduction, unlawful imprisonment, child abuse, and falsification of medical prescriptions. During the search of the apartment, extensive documentation was found that confirmed the systematic nature of their actions. In the safe in the Clarks' bedroom, we found dozens of notebooks with records that Elizabeth had kept since Jacob's abduction, says investigator Carter. She documented everything: his reactions to medications, progress in learning, emotional and behavioral changes. It was a proper scientific journal about an experiment on a child. Records dated to March 2015 confirmed that Robert and Elizabeth had abducted Jacob from his mother's house in Gary. The plan had been developed in advance and was based on Robert's professional access to the Miller family. "Today we rescued Jay from unsuitable environment," wrote Elizabeth on the 4th of March 2015. "Everything went according to plan. R provided access. The sedatives worked quickly. Transport proceeded without complications. We begin phase 1 of the cleansing program."
Particularly shocking for the investigators was the discovery of additional materials that indicated the Clark couple's far-reaching plans. On their computer, they found dossiers on 3 other children from problematic families with whom Robert had worked. For each, detailed psychological profiles and rescue plans had been created. They did not consider themselves criminals, explains Dr. Lawrence Friedman, a psychiatrist who examined the suspects. In their distorted perception, they were rescuing a talented child from an unfavorable environment. They called it selective adoption and educational project. According to Robert's statement during interrogation, the idea to rescue Jacob arose after Elizabeth conducted an unofficial test with him and classified him as a potentially gifted child. In Elizabeth's records, the boy's extraordinary cognitive potential is repeatedly mentioned, which was being wasted in an unstructured environment. Their motivation combined pseudo-scientific ambitions with distorted altruism, explains Dr. Friedman. Elizabeth actually believed that she was developing a groundbreaking educational method that would allow a child to be cleansed of negative social influences. Robert, on the other hand, was more driven by the idea of rescuing children from a system he was disappointed with. Jacob's medical examination revealed consequences of prolonged isolation and medicinal control. Despite his physical integrity, the boy's psychological condition was severe. Jacob was diagnosed with a complex of post-traumatic disorders, including institutional syndrome and selective mutism, reports Dr. Anita Sharma, a child psychiatrist who led the rehabilitation process. Years of isolation led to serious disorders of social interaction and emotional regulation. Nevertheless, cognitive functions are preserved at a surprisingly high level. Jacob's academic knowledge exceeds age norms in some areas. A separate aspect of the investigation was the role of the Clarks' adopted daughter, 12-year-old Mia. Interrogations and psychological assessments showed that the girl actually knew nothing of Jacob's existence. Mia was never allowed to enter her father's study without accompaniment, explains child psychologist Jennifer Osborne, who worked with the girl after her parents' arrest. The Clarks created for her a completely separate world, free and open, in contrast to Jacob's strict isolation. Mia was their showcase, proof of their success as parents. In interrogations, Mia told that she sometimes heard strange sounds from her father's study, but when she asked about it, Elizabeth explained that these were audio recordings for research. The parents urgently pressed her never to disturb her father during his work sessions and not to enter his study without invitation. Amanda Miller, Jacob's biological mother, received news of her son's discovery on the 9th of October 2021. After 7 years of searching and uncertainty, her reaction was emotionally complex. "I always knew he was alive," says Amanda in her first interview after finding her son. "But I could never imagine what he had to go through. The hardest thing is understanding that the person who was supposed to help our family used his position to destroy it.
The reunion of mother and son took place on the 15th of October, after psychologists had prepared both for the meeting. The process was difficult. Jacob did not remember his mother and initially reacted to her with caution. Elizabeth had convinced the boy that his biological mother had died, explains Dr. Sharma. For him, meeting Amanda was practically getting to know a new person. It took several sessions to establish initial contact. The court proceedings against Robert and Elizabeth Clark began on the 18th of January 2022. The trial attracted attention from national media and child protection experts. The couple pleaded not guilty to any of the 15 charges and insisted they had acted in the child's interest. "The system constantly fails children," declared Elizabeth Clark in her address to the court. "We gave Jacob what neither his real mother nor the state could provide: structured development, protection from chaos, and focus on education. Yes, we resorted to extreme measures, but only because the system left us no choice." The defense built on the argument of mental disorder of the defendants, forensic altruism, and pathological conviction of the correctness of their actions. However, the prosecution presented extensive evidence of premeditation and planning of the crime. 12th of April 2022, the jury found the Clark couple guilty on all charges. On the 27th of May, Judge Richard Conley sentenced each of them to 25 years in prison, without possibility of early release during the first 15 years. This crime is particularly serious because you used your expertise and access to vulnerable families to commit it, declared Judge Conley during sentencing. You not only robbed a child of 7 years of normal life, but did so under the cover of structures meant to protect children. After completion of the court proceedings, Jacob and Amanda Miller moved to a secret location under new names. According to rare reports from specialists involved in the rehabilitation program, Jacob makes slow but steady progress. The process of recovery after such trauma takes years, but Jacob has every chance for a normal life, reports Dr. Sharma. His intellectual abilities are actually high, and now that he receives a healthy social environment, these abilities can fully develop, but no longer as a result of an experiment, but as natural development. Maxim Levin, whose accidental discovery led to Jacob's rescue, founded in 2022 the non-profit organization Digital Witnesses, which deals with developing ethical technological solutions for protecting children. "This story has changed my life," says Levin. "I understood that technology can be not only a tool for violating privacy, but also a means of protecting the most vulnerable. Today, our organization works on developing systems that help prevent similar cases without violating legitimate rights to privacy." The Jacob Miller case led to a serious review of protocols in the child protection system. In the year 2023, the Jacob Law was passed, which establishes new standards for checking social workers and regular monitoring of at-risk children. The most disturbing aspect of this case is how easily a child became literally invisible to society, comments Senator Lisa Montgomery, one of the authors of the new law. Jacob was, for 7 years, in an apartment in a densely populated residential complex, and nobody noticed his absence in the system. This is a system failure that we must correct. The psychiatric assessment of the Clark couple, which was conducted after the verdict announcement, revealed a complex combination of narcissistic personality disorder, paranoia, and the so-called savior syndrome. According to experts, their case illustrates the danger posed by people who combine expertise with radical beliefs and personal psychological problems.